church was I always was taking somebody to church. You know, my friends, somebody come up with an idea, they come and approach me with the idea, and before long, I'm in charge of the idea. And I'm leading them, and we're doing the thing together. That's how it's happened in most of my life. But we had prayer meetings at from house to house of older people. I guess that's one of the reasons that I became so close to old people, and respectful of old people. That's ingrained in me as well. Because Grandma was old, and her friends were old people. And I liked the fact that I was sort of amazed at, maybe because I read so well at a younger age. I don't know. I was reading the Bible, and at one period in my life, because I had done something wrong, and then nobody asked me what it was. You can ask me if you want to. You won't get an answer. But I promised the Lord from that point, I think I was about 12 years old, that I would read a book in the Bible every day. I made a promise like that. And I kept that promise till I was 16 or 17 years old. Every day, because I became very much acquainted with Jude and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. The short books, you know. And I had to hurry to make it to bed. But things always happened to me around the church, you know. Boy Scouts, that came out of the church setting. I became a Life Scout, but it came out through the church. Otherwise, I wouldn't become a Boy Scout if it hadn't been held at Mount Olivet Baptist Church, because Grandma wasn't going to let me go no other church but Mount Olivet Baptist Church. And I was immured by the minister there. So I say I mimicked him as I preached. And I guess the Bible class, jumping back to the Bible class, I learned a whole lot. Listening to the old people, the same people that I observed who got happy in church, you know, jumped up and hollered and were in the spirit. All of that experience. So I come from a disciplined church where if you didn't get the spirit, then there's something wrong with you. So I found myself at an early age in the spirit and crying one day, and that's how I called myself converted and went down to shake the preacher's hand. And all of it stemmed from that, just reading the Bible, being present, listening to the old people talk about what the Spirit was and what the various scriptures that we read, what they meant, and coming up with ideas on my own, and being very inquisitive, being really knocked down many times because of my inquisitiveness, early on asking questions that adults tell me, boy, what you want to know that for? But that was a part of the religiosity, the kind of religion that will allow you to go so many steps always being careful not to question the unquestionable. And sometimes you just can't question it in that church that I work. That's where I grew up. But I learned to question those things still, questions like God. Where is God? Why is this happening the way it's happening? When I ask questions like that. What is adultery? Why is there adultery? And I got shut up many a time asking foolish questions like that. But that's the way I learned, by asking questions on.
Did you have brothers and sisters, Charles?
I had 4 brothers and 1 sister.
Were they all also deeply involved in the life of the church as you were?
They had to get out there just like I had to get out there to the church. There was no excuse for not going to church. We went to Sunday school. We went to church service. We went to BYPU. We went to night service every Sunday. Then you got Wednesday prayer meeting. And then we had scout meeting on Monday night. And then I went to the Police Boys Club on Saturday night. So my activities were, I didn't have a lot of time to do wrong, but I found the time. Found the time to do wrong.
When did what we're calling the movement first grasp your attention, Charles?
Well, when I was 2 years old, Mom got in this bus. And while she was paying the bus driver, I climbed up on the seat between 2 white people. And I was pulling up and looking over in the street, to see what activities. That's how I estimate my age at 2. Because you know how tall the seat is. And I had to pull up to the seat. And all of a sudden, my right hand was taken away from me, and the rest of my body followed in the air toward the back. That was my introduction to what I later understood to be, the safety precautions, adults raising their children to stay alive. Then a second thing happened to me in 1954. In 54, the Board of Education decision came down, the Brown decision. And I don't know what else had happened in that year. But for some reason, we got the idea that we ought to go to these white churches. So in 1954,
Who was the we?
the guys who, some of my Boy Scout friends, and a guy by the name of Billy Lee, it was his idea. I don't know why he came to me with it. But he came to me with it. And I came up with what we ought to do with it. So, but he was in the choir. We were singing together all over the state of Virginia, really. With the Police Boys Club. That's sure all right. A lot of things I forget. We come back. We sung all over the state with the Police Boys Club. But anyway, Billy and I and several other young guys, we were about, in 54 now. I went to school in 54. Went to college in 54. So I was a senior in high school. What age, I don't know. 16 or 17, something like that. So we went to these churches. Some of them let us in the church and set us in front as spectacles. Some of them set us behind. And 1 or 2 didn't let us come in. Those were my first introductions, I think that was the question. My introduction to the movement. So what I'm saying is all my introductions were action oriented. Oh yeah, there's one other thing that happened to me when at a young age. I might have been 14 or 15. I was working at the 5 and 10 cent store. And I went downstairs to the stock room to get some cans or whatever I was supposed to do down there. But this white girl brought me down there and approached me and put her hands on me. And the boy got out of there. All I could see was a rope around my neck. That was one of the instances that happened. See, I ran away from a white woman. Ah, boy. And those were times when I was afraid to sit down by a white woman. I ain't a white person as far as I'm concerned, but a white woman, I'm about to sit down by a white woman. White folks, something else.
On those times when you were involved with the kneelings at those churches, Charles, what was your grandmother saying about that, or your mother or your father?
I don't know. I never had a father.
Okay.
But my mom didn't say nothing. I can't remember her ever discouraging me. Grandma never discouraged me. See, Grandma told me a story. What happened to Grandpa? In our whole family, so many stories. Grandpa protested that a black man was lynched, was hanged from a tree. His gonads were cut off and put in another tree. And his body and the gonads were burnt in both trees. And Grandpa said in a white folks store, that was a horrible thing to have happened to a human being. And for that, he would run out of town. Ku Klux Klan came, put these crosses in his yard. And this grandma tell me about this, so I'm listening to them talk about it. I'm sure they wasn't telling to me, I guess, but I was listening. And I heard that story several times, and that's why our whole family, she had about 13 children, and so Papa had to leave, and she sent the children dispersed all over the country to various aunties she had. She had about, let's see, 14, I don't know how many, uncles and aunts, her sisters and brothers all over. We had sort of a diaspora of our family. And so all that, you know, I had no conscious thought that made me do anything that I've done. But I guess 1 + 1 can equal 2. You know, and all that stuff all together, I guess, and other things that happened in my life, that when I started to feel real confident in myself, dealing with myself, let me tell you how this. When I was in college, and you ever heard of the, let me see, what you call that group? It's called the Human Relations Council, Richmond Council on Human Relations. Why I went to that, I don't know. But I went. I liked going to those meetings. So you had white people and a few black people there. So I'm listening to these white folk asking these questions. I said, God darn, white person didn't know that. A white person asking a question like that. That's another white person. Ask a question like that. Wow, they're stupid. Wow, white folk don't know as much as I thought they know. I was those meetings at the Richmond Council on Human Relations did so much for my inner self and believing in myself, looking at white folk that didn't know. Now I had read this and I had read the other, I read everything I get my hands on. And I knew this and I knew the other, and I had thoughts, and then what I didn't know I could fudge on. But it was just a realization that sank into me that what I have given up to white folk is not theirs. I got a lot to give. I got a lot to be proud of. And I started reading even more than, hey, where did I come from? Why is it that? One thing that puzzles me more than anything else, I'm talking too much now.
No, go ahead.
One thing that puzzled me more than anything else, when I read about Africa, and how is it that a little bit of bold of white folk will come in and take us? I just did something wrong with that. It took me a long time to understand or to come up with different ideas on that, because that was still eating at me, at my ego. See, I got the biggest ego in the world. But it's a trained ego. And it came from a deflated ego. An ego that was scared of white folk, from scared of white folk, from scared to sit down by a white woman, to having white folk eat out of my hand, literally. Feeding white folk. Understanding white folk just human beings that have been hurt and messed up just like we are. Understanding that we're saving black folk and white folk as well. That's a big ego to carry around.
But you managed.
I managed to carry it around. But with all that, I'm just trying.
Come in?
Yeah. Where did you go to college?
I went to college in Richmond, Virginia, Virginia Union University. Richmond, Virginia, where I had that experience at the Council on Human Relations.
How long were you there?
I was there 7 years. Took me 7 years to get out.
What did you study?
I studied sociology, I majored in sociology, got a degree in sociology, and I got a degree in theology, PhD degree from the seminary there, 3-year degree.
So that would be from, say, 1954 to 61?
Right, from 54 to 61.
And how did you get involved with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee?
Well, a boy came to me again, and when I was in seminary, this guy came to me and said, "Look here, Sherrod," because I've been reading about, I'd always read the Afro-Americans in the Pittsburgh Carrier.
This is a Baltimore Afro-American, right?
Richmond.
Richmond, oh, I see.
Yeah. And so this boy brought me this article and showed me what they were doing in Nashville and Atlanta, and questioned me as to why couldn't we do the same thing. And we went from there. Again, somebody bring it to me, then I organize it. And before you know it, we had
organizing in Richmond before you went down south, further south?
Yeah.
I see. What were you all doing in Richmond?
same thing I was doing down there. Protesting, going to jail, picketing, toy hammers, another department store, getting people to register to vote, all of that we were doing in our part-time, you know.
When did you start the sit-in in Richmond, and over what?
It was February 22nd at Tallhammer's department store where we started the sit-in that took us to jail.
And the year would be what?
61. Wait a minute. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I guess it's 61. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I had been 60. But I was answering the question how I heard about SNCC. That is through the newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
When they called for a meeting, I think it was at Shaw. And so we went down. A carload of us went down. Frank Pinkston, the guy who brought me the idea, went down with me and some other students.
Went down where, Charles?
I think it was at Shaw University first meeting.
Or at the first SNCC meeting?
First SNCC meeting. So we organized a coordinating committee. That's where I met Miss Baker. Miss Ella Baker. I met her there. She was the one who made the call for students to come down. She was employed at that time by a Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Charles, when you all were organizing there in Richmond and Virginia generally, did that work consciously for you have any connection to the deep religious feelings that you had, the deep religious connections that you had, or was that simply something on another track, a kind of political track?
I have to say that most of what I've done in my life, I've done because I believed it was right to do it. And my kind of right stems from feelings. My actions come more initially from feeling than thinking. I feel and then I think. I can look at something and tell you whether to go through the window or not. Then I try to, then I act on it. That's my history. And I don't think I've changed from that.
So you were feeling that this was something religious, spiritual, that you all were doing?
See, what I'm saying is I didn't call it religious.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't call it spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you that when I did it, it was. I'm telling you that when I did it, there was a feeling there. There was when I'm marching down the street and leading in the songs and singing the songs and telling the guy to stay in line and being protected and feeling protected by and being a us. I'm a church. I'm a part of a fellowship. But did I impose that on anybody? No. Did I talk about us going down there and being the church? Did I talk about us going down there and be the edge of this or the other? No. But not one time did we go down there without praying. Not one time did we go down there without being thankful for having been spared our lives when we came back. Not one time did we not feel the closeness, the spiritualness, the interlockedness of our hearts, the soulfulness of our being all together, willingness to die if necessary. We felt all of that. And that's more than we ever felt in church.
Mm.
See, it's church, but it's greater than the church.
Yes. Yes.
And where did that inspiration come to you to take that feeling out into the public arena?
See, it wasn't a conscious taking out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what am I doing right now? I'm sitting here. I'm talking. But I'm also acting out. I know I got young people. I got older people here. They got open minds to hear about the movement. I got a chance to plant a seed in somebody's mind so they can understand that they have the same challenge that I had and that we have together. Wherever you are, whatever you do, the challenge is still there. It's still time for us to be the church. It's still time for us to be spirit people, living together and willing to suffer if necessary for what's right. That's the church. Wherever it is, whatever form it takes, in the prison, in the pool room, wherever it is, the Spirit can be there. And when you know there's something wrong that's going wrong and you refuse to say anything about it, you're quenching the Spirit. Let the Spirit speak. Let the Spirit come on out.
All right. Charles, when you followed that Spirit and went down to shore to that first meeting of the students who were involved in movement, when you all got together down there at shore in the spring of 1960, what did that feel like to you? How did you, what do you remember in terms of these feelings that you say are so important to you?
I remember so clearly how I felt when some of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life got up and gave their opinions on various questions that were raised. And I was so proud that in their speaking, in their spirit, that I could identify with their spirit. And I knew I just couldn't wait for us to get back together. I knew that we needed to get back together. And I felt that we would get back together. Now, I had no idea how we would get back together or when, or I didn't know anything like that. I wasn't even thinking about anything like that. But I had that yearning. I wanted us to get back together. And while we were together there, I felt strength, and I felt deep sense of fellowship and togetherness, and we were like one people, knowing that this fellow came from Nashville and this fellow came from Missouri or North Carolina or somewhere else, that girl. And they're people that I had never seen before in my life. And yet, when they opened their mouths, they were mouthing my feelings. See, that's spirit life.
Mm-hmm.
That's destination. That's vision. That's God working in life. I mean, when you see that and when you observe that, that's what you say, oh, the Lord is here. And this is the way. We're finally together. It's an us thing. And that's how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
When did you become conscious of the way of nonviolence, in a way you had begun at college to resist nonviolently? Were you aware of what had happened in Montgomery in '55? What had been your exploration, say, between 1955 and 1961?
Now, in '54, we had already demonstrated. We knew we were not to be violent.
Why?
We know we could be killed. We all grew up in the church, and the church taught us nonviolence.
Mm-hmm.
Overcome evil with good, and all of that. But to say that how you come about nonviolence, how you came about nonviolence, I never heard the word nonviolence until the movement days, when maybe from Dr. King. No, I first read it out of in the Afro-American. That's where I first read it.
And what was the context?
Movement. It was the context of James Lawson wrote an article in one of the papers. Might have been Journal and Guide. So I read the Journal and Guide, Afro-American, Pittsburgh Courier every week. These were black weeklies, and they came to the library at Virginia Union. And I read Afro something ways. I forget what it was, but I'd read that every month.